thought I would get into this idea of community building. Let me see if I can get this to work. Okay, yes. Our communities can be measured and mapped in social media. And I was thinking about a ruler, so I put that out there. So one of the things I was thinking about is that how would we map? I'm a tools guy, so I tend to see things very literally. And so there's this one tool that's free, and I also know a lot of people in the arts don't have a lot of money. So, and being someone that has a very strong opinion about tools and platforms and coming from the opposite direction that a lot of people come from, most of the times people think about the problem they want to solve, and then they get into how am I going to solve it, and then when it gets finally down to the point when they know what they want to do, then they figure out what tools they're going to use and how they're going to do it. And that's probably the right way to do it, but my mind works in the other direction. I tend to look at a platform or a tool or a method and then try to think about what it might be used for. And a lot of times I try to use things for other purposes than what they were intended for. And I guess that's my perverse artist in me. But I tend to try to take platforms and tools that were never designed to do what I wanted them to do and make them do what I want them to do. So this is a free tool called Blue Nod that you can maps a Twitter hashtag or a Twitter community to see what's influential, what's happening at that particular time. It's free, but it only has a memory of the last 500 or 1,500 tweets because it's free, and they're pulling data from GNIPT or DataSift, which is these are aggregators that most platforms use and buy data from. So it has some good things, but on the other hand, it doesn't have a long memory. So you'd have to have it running, basically, and be looking at it on a daily basis and writing down and taking down things. So there's that, but it's free. So that's something you could do. And here I was looking at Rutgers in this case, so I was just looking at people who were talking at that time, and you can click on the icons, or they do hashtags now as well, which only was recent. So you can look at the accounts and see who is influential. Sometimes you see connections and lines. Another tool, which isn't free, is called, actually this one is called Mythology, and I've never been able to pronounce their name. It's a Canadian firm in Montreal that does a lot of mapping. The founder is an astronomer. So this thing actually is kind of like a map that, in this case, it's Twitter conversations that tries to connect the important people in the conversations that are happening around WaterFire. And what you can see is that it automatically tries to create a sense of community by its structure. So it links in conversations about the brazier, the WaterFire this weekend, the volunteering. These are all seen as separate conversations, although they may all really be related very, very closely. The idea is that people have always wanted a map. They have always wanted to see how things are connected. And so network topology, this is really just more network theory, is trying to take in the last, say, 500 tweets or so. But this tool is really more for larger conversations. The fact of the matter is there really isn't that much signal around WaterFire compared to some of the larger brands and things that people would use these tools for. So if you were Obama and wanted to see a debate on healthcare, you could see things large. But when you're talking about, what's happening in Providence, it's somewhat problematic to find enough signal to really do a good analysis on, because there just isn't that many people tweeting and posting. And a lot of it is often the brand. In this case, it's the brand itself. So you don't get that much advocacy going on from other people as you would like. And that might be one of the goals of social media and communities, to promote those things. The other kind of thing this thing does is, this is a map of people who are publishing content. And I have the Placemakers US WaterFire. So you can see the connections there between various ones. I just tried to pull something that would actually show what's happening online. Not necessarily what's happening, and I'll have a demo of something very exciting for you to show you right after this presentation, but not necessarily what's happening on the river, but what's happening online based on those hashtags and based on those accounts. And then this is an interesting concept that a lot of computer scientists, linguists have tried to do. I've been involved in some companies that have tried to break down conversations to fundamental concepts. So here is a tree map that shows that of the conversations on Facebook that were going on, it tries to auto-categorize and say that some of them are about habitat, some of them are about recreation, some of them are about relationships. So you can click on those maps, just like when you're flying over the country and you see these maps. There's an attempt to put information into categories so that you can look at it. Again, more useful for larger kinds of conversations, small regional things. There might not be enough signal there to really make it worthwhile, but this is just one way. And then here's another free tool, Mention Map, that actually takes a Twitter account and maps it out. And that one actually was kind of useful because some of the best tools are the cheap ones and the free ones, because in a way the paid tools don't always really give you the value until you know exactly what you really want to do. When you have to get it down to almost a level where you have to know exactly what you want to accomplish. And I take this, last week, Joanne and I, my companion partner, were in Colombia, in Bogota, and we were at a conference that I was speaking, and I gave a class that I gave it in London last year, and I cleaned it up and I gave it to about this many people in Bogota, trying to have a translator and everything. And one of the guys there was a friend of mine, brought me down to Colombia, and he was trying to measure the impact of what was happening at the conference versus what was happening outside the conference in Bogota and in the rest of Colombia and in Panama and places like that. And he was using Radian 6, which was the most popular poster child platform that everybody cites as what's wrong with the industry. And I said to him, I bet you can't do that, can you, with that platform? And he says, no, I can't. I'm frustrated. And I said, but Topsy is here at the conference, and they can do that. And as soon as we got the definition, when I started asking people in the audience what they were trying to do, once I got it down to like, well, this is exactly what I want to do, like in this case, this guy saying, I don't want to measure what's in the conference. I want to measure everything that's outside of the conference so I can measure whether there's been amplification of the message in the outside community. I was able to figure out, okay, well, then you're going to need these kinds of tools and you're going to need these kinds of platforms. And a lot of times, until you get the definition down really tight, it's hard to figure out how to do anything in the social space because you don't know what to do. So, tools like this a lot of times are just as good. If you don't know what you're actually going for, you might as well not spend any money on buying anything until you can get that level of definition. And here's another free tool, but it takes a bit of time to work with it. And I have to admit, I'm not a power user of NodeXL. But NodeXL is a tool that will pull data off of Twitter and I believe off of Facebook and make network maps out of it. But it's a hacker kind of thing. So you need to spend some time. And so somebody wrote about 6 types of social networks formations that were happening in NodeXL. Again, a free tool that Microsoft originally pioneered, or it's a plugin to Excel. And you can load in data, but you need to be a data geek to kind of play with it. You don't need to be a programmer, but you do need to be willing to spend 15 or 20 hours playing with it before you get it to spill out what you want it to spill out. And it has a lot of functions that might not seem intuitive, that are more based on in-betweenness of nodes and things like that, that don't necessarily lend themselves to, but when this person who set this up, and I have a link to the article at Forbes, they were able to see 6 different type of networks. Like one would be polarized. That's in a very close, like maybe our our group here would be polarized because it's relatively small and there's a couple of dominant conversations going on. As you go through, you can see larger different swaths, broadcast support, and so on, where the cluster shape, the shape of the defines somewhat of the nature of the conversations going on. And that's like form and function. I almost think of the Bauhaus School and things like that, where form and function are the natural forms of the network and how they form sort of define their function and also categorize them. Now, another type of way to track, and Barnaby and Peter and I have talked about Navizon as one way to track the conference. And some of you who have physical things that happen, because I want to distinguish between events that happen in the physical world and also events that happen in the virtual world, in the fact that both of them might be happening at the same time. But a lot of times people are collecting together on a virtual level, interpenetrating. And so in a generation of many of my students at Rutgers and people who are millennials, there aren't a strong difference between here and what's online. The 20-something people don't see what they're doing online as being not real. Whereas in my generation and ours, we do see a strong distinction between, most of us in this room are probably over 30, and many of us, and I'm up there. So I spend a lot of time online, but I still think of what I'm doing here as, the real, and what I'm doing there is just something on a computer. But my son isn't like that. And a lot of millennials spend a lot of time online, and they don't see their time online as not being real. So having caveat that, there are ways to triangulate and pull out the signal from my phone, which has a Bluetooth, and count the number of people. And that's not telling me who I am, but it is counting that I could track foot traffic. And I think those are relatively inexpensive. They've been used with geofencing as a concept where we put a small local network in a room, say 150 feet, which is about this room, maybe a little bit, and say next room would be another network. So there could be two geofence network, and as I walk from this room into the next room, I might get a different message because I have a different network. So there's networking protocol that's been worked out. But you can pick up the cell phone signals and count foot traffic that way. I haven't followed up with this company particularly. They have a couple of different products for indoor analytics, where if you're at a conference and you want to track people from going from different kiosks, it can do that. But it can also track people walking around, so that would be useful. So if you say that there's 100,000 people that come to a WaterFire, potentially, you could actually count the 100,000 people, and most of them, I assume, having a device, and maybe some of them being family, so not everybody has a device. So maybe there's a fludge factor in there of 1.5 or 2. You multiply, by average, because it's a family, and you've got, 3 kids with you, and when you average it out, you say, okay, I picked up 50,000 signals. There's probably 100,000 people. Now, impact. Okay. How do you measure the impact? Okay, well, this I'm going to demo for you right after my presentation, so I'll leave myself about 10 minutes, to demo it. I have actually spoken to the CEO of Geophedia, and I have feeds monitoring the hotel right now as well as the WaterFire basin for tomorrow. And I've been able to pick up a lot of conversations that were happening around the conference. Not all of them, not because I was following any hashtag, but because I was following this location. So I'm actually pulling in Pulling in a couple of other things as well. So it's kind of interesting that I'm picking up people at the hotel and what they're talking about and a couple of vivid scenes. But I'm able to pick up, I just got access to Geophidia on Thursday night, and I only had a little time to set up something, so I pointed it at Kennedy Plaza just to see if I could pick up what people were saying then. You know, I got a couple of interesting conversations. This is how the map looks. So I don't know the pricing for this technology, and most of the uses of it have been in public safety and government and CIA. They haven't paid a big amount of attention to education in our communities, but that's an interest, and they've been willing to work with me, so I think that it's possible that I might be able to bundle this as some kind of pricing or figure out what the pricing would be that would be attractive to art organizations. I don't think it's going to be free, but I think they have a technology that's somewhat different than most of the others in this space because they can work with geofencing and they can work at a location block level that the others can't. And you know, even ones we've used, Joanne and I have used Venue Labs, but you still have to know the Instagram and the Pinterest feeds. This, you don't. The caveat is that not everybody has geolocation services turned on. So, you know, you might not still pick up everything, but you'll pick up a different swath and probably more relevant to the actual location with this kind of technology than you will with most of the listening platforms. So, the other thing I wanted to go into here was the actual things you can do with these platforms besides just listening to what's happening on the block. And that is, at the time I went over to Professor Lubar's class at Brown last month, I was presenting some things he could do. I listened to the research yesterday. And they came up with some really good stuff that said basically that if you participated in WaterFire, you were more likely to participate in it again, and that you were more likely to tell everybody else that it was great and you should come to Providence. But if you didn't participate in WaterFire, you probably wouldn't have those effects. So, you know, and I was mentioning it to Peter, and he said, yeah, well, you know, and everybody said, well, we knew that already. And I said, yeah, but you didn't know by how much. You know, like, because when you know by how much, that's what analytics is about. You know, when you can start making decisions about things, when you know how much. Like, if you could show that you could get more people to come into the conference and be, or the event, like in this case, WaterFire, and be advocacy for it, then you could start calculating the effects of more advocacy and more people in that would then generate perhaps a case to go to the mayor or the governor or some other official and say, if I had this funds or I had these more things, then maybe I could, you know, this is what I could expect to produce. But without those studies, you don't have the actual how much. You don't know the number. So we have 44,000 fans. Actually, it's more now. It's almost 45,000. What people didn't know is that earlier this year, Facebook released a search language called Facebook Graph Search, and it allows you to do things like people who come to like WaterFire that are dating and live in Woonsocket, and who are they? And I picked up two people, you know, in a relationship. In this case. So I wanted to see, you know, like I wanted to study how different people are, because when Facebook Graph Search first came out early this year and it wasn't released to everybody, which it is now, but not all features are turned on. And I'll explain that in a minute. I wanted to see if there was any substantial difference between my students that were musicians versus my students that were painters versus my students that were in the performing arts. And I found that, you know, at least based on, I did a search, like, give me everybody that's going to Rutgers, that lives in New Brunswick, New Jersey, that likes painting versus likes, you know, sculpture versus likes. And I don't have that diagram in this deck, and I found that there were substantial differences between my students who like different things. Not surprising to me, but it also told me that to reach students at different interests, I would probably have to have different things in my online course. Like the students that like piano tended to like John Mayer and the Beatles. And because a piano, you sit behind a piano, there's a sense of being protected by the piano. And also the idea that people who like, or pianists like to be edgy, but they don't want to be all out there. They're somewhat protected. So they kind of like to be progressive, but they don't necessarily want to be, out there too much. People who are in the performing arts tended to like nonprofits. They also like the Rutgers Marching Band. That not surprised, but it's interesting because people who would be in a percussionist would probably need a physical aspect to their work, simply because someone who is a percussionist needs to be physical. The cellist liked Panera Bread and Times Square. So I thought, well, I don't know what the numbers are here, but it got me to think about the fact that in my courses, to make them interesting, I had to address all modalities, and some of them might be the performing arts most problematic, because those are the ones, many here too, that need to see the efficacy of these tools right now. So if I got a jazz musician to do a YouTube video and he only got 17 people to look at it, and then he followed my advice and he got 500, well, he didn't go viral, but he did much better than he did before, and he hadn't done anything. So anyway, here's another thing that Foursquare is doing. It's visualizing. In my online presentation, I actually have the little movie of this. This is just a snapshot. But Foursquare has been able to do, and they're a geolocation check-in service, I should say, been able to map pretty much closely to the map of the physical world, the activities of people. So now we go into another area of geolocation. One of the things I wanted to explain, and maybe this isn't in a perfect order, is that when we think about the physical virtual world, we think about the fact that there's several layers of information that we can interact with. We have the longitude and latitude, say, of this hotel. We have its physical address, and then we have the structure itself that we're in, the hotel. We have then the brand. In this case, it's Omni Providence. I don't know. That seems, according to what I've been told, the name's been changing. It used to be something else last year. And then we have the gathering at the conference, which is the art of placemaking, And all of those things superimpose on this place. And this is the art of placemaking on this place. And on top of that lie services like Foursquare, Facebook, Yelp, and Google+, that all talk through these protocols. These things are less permanent on the top. Obviously the location of the building and its physical structure is more permanent than our conference here. But, it's kind of interesting when you think about that. Now, these new social media platforms use all of those things. Foursquare uses it. So, the first thing I want to do is when we look at data, we should go broad first. Go broad. Like, let's look at everybody that likes WaterFire Providence, and turns out that you can actually study that, and we talked about that at Brown. You can scrape the first 1,000 results of the 44,000, because it'll only show you 1,000, and you can do something like this. I did this for another client. I just went through and counted the faces of the first, knowing that the Facebook's going to show me the people that I'm friends with first. So I'll probably want to count those out. So I might want to go a couple hundred down. That might take a couple hours. And in this work, I always say put a 0 next to everything. So if you think it's going to take 3 hours, put a 0 next to it, because it's probably going to take 30 hours. And the reality is, because when you actually work with data, things take a lot longer than you think they're going to take. It's easy to say it's going to take 2 or 3 hours, and then it takes you 30 hours. That's the analyst's dilemma. Data's messy. So, when the time you get this, you could get something like this. And this is ethnographic research, and then you can segment it into affinity maps. Like I've done this for things like fashion brands in New York, people who work in fashion in New York. And then not this map, but what are their interests? And usually it's not technology; it's usually lifestyle, programming. So you can see like, how am I going to reach people? In this case, the entertainment was here. We were just kind of making maps to show the concept in one of my clients. Now, pages liked by people is more interesting in some ways because you can do more with it. You can filter. Like if you find the people who like something on Facebook, like a page, like WaterFire, which is a page created around an organization that also creates events. You can also see that the public figures go Providence, Mark. I did this a couple months ago, so it might be slightly different now. These were the top 3. If I just looked at everybody of the 44,000. And then if I looked at people who lived in Narragansett, it was somewhat different. They liked Dell's Lemonade and JAR, NBC 10, and South Rhode Island Magazine. Implications being, we might not know how many people we're talking about here, but the implications are that people who come from a different place might like something slightly different, and it might be good to know about that. What you do with that on a marketing or a messaging level is up to you. But musicians liked by WaterFire Providence. Well, we're all an older crowd here, so it's not surprising to me that Roomful of Blues, James Taylor, and Bonnie Raitt might be the favorite people who would like WaterFire. Most of the audience are on the older side and probably likes Carole King, and I understand that because I like those people too. But those who live near Narragansett are a younger crowd, and they tend to like the Raveners, Erica Van Pelt, which was, I think, an American Idol contestant last season or the season, and the Grateful Dead. So they have a different likes. And so the implication is that as you can micro-segment more, you can actually see more things and figure out if that's actionable for you. Now, some new things that are coming up but not released yet. Facebook is being able to search for specific types of posts on Facebook. I haven't had that enabled on my account yet. So I understand it's in beta, so some people have it, most don't. And another thing is being able to look at posts that happen at a certain place, like here. I've seen some of that showing up for me, but not at the level like this. But here's an example of all the posts that happened at the White House. Those are things that are rolling out at Facebook, but they may not be active in your accounts yet. Now, here's the things you can do, again, on the cheap. And I've done this, and I've taught this to my students. You can develop a list of local topical influencers to promote your event. I did a project with my class in the spring where I had them use FollowerWonk, which is a free tool that searches Twitter profiles. And I asked them to look at the people in the areas that were interesting to them. In this case, I looked at placemaking, and I only found, I think, 9 people that had placemaking in their Twitter profiles. And I also wanted them to be in Rhode Island or nearby, so I found those 9 people. And I have the query down here, so you could click on it, it'll actually bring it up. Also, you can hyper-target with Google. You could use Google Images to hyper-target. I have the query right down there. There were some people here, as I looked at, I used Google search to look for nearby sympathetic authors. And I found a couple of people by clicking who are at the conference here today, as well as some people that go to Brown that might be interesting to cultivate in connection with this. So. Then I use some text analytics tools. Like this is a free tool by Neoformix. The guy that authors Neoformix is a visualizer, a programmer, a visualizer. He's done a lot of really interesting infographics, and he has a couple of utilities that are free. They don't have long memories, so but this one will look at the Twitter activity of the last, say, 1,500 tweets and bubble it up into, what it thinks are topics and conversations. And when you click on them, it shows you all those conversations. So I was, clicking on placemaking, and I was clicking on cars, and you can kind of see that by default, it comes up looking at the New York Times. I looked at WaterFire Providence. And again, it shows you conversations on the right, which I cut off. But you can have that running, and that can show you, it can bubble. So it uses the idea of clustering in its best use, which is to aggregate information that might be interesting into clusters by text analytics, which is things that are closely related. And then there's another tool he has called Spot that's also free that also looks at real time. So if you had that running real time, you could see the last 100 or 200 tweets going by, and you could aggregate by who is generating the most. So this particular visualization, Spot has 6 that they have that shows, it tries to group them. So this is more to run at the actual event. Then this is another tool called it says PeerReach. This one I just cut out. I looked at the top 4 accounts for the art of placemaking, and I like Peter's and account and art of placemaking account. And what it tries to do is look at the audience and see the overlaps, where are the followers of those accounts most interested in based on. There's also a plugin for Chrome that will try to auto-categorize what's in your Twitter stream. Then you can do something really interesting that is really cheap but just takes time, and you can use Twitter's advanced search function to search around here or around where you are, and let's say the nearest 15 miles, and put in, I put in the accounts, I pulled out a measure map, Peter Placemakers, Peter Mello, Metris Art, WaterFire Prov, NEA Arts, and Arts Block, whatever, around Providence, Rhode Island, which is 15 miles. And then I just put in the keywords, placemaking and so on, and see what Twitter pulls up. So it pulled up a stream, and I started looking through, and because Twitter's jiggling with things a lot these days, it just went public yesterday at I think $45 a share. The first stuff that comes up isn't necessarily geolocal. It may be advertised, but as you look through, you'll see different things pop up, like a follower, not necessarily local in all cases, although some cases it is, but very highly topical. So you can build lists this way by looking through Twitter. I tend to look at not the accounts themselves, but who's interacting. Like I was looking for one for Dr. Oz, and health and heart, and some lady said, I had 5 heart attacks, Dr. Oz, what do I do? Those kinds of things. I said, but the lady only had 45 followers, but maybe she was somebody to build support for. And you can make a list. Like, this is a list that I ask students to make. Go through these tools and make your own list, of people that you might want to contact later on. This one was about, I think, arts, one of the arts. And then the last part of this prepared presentation is something I'm working at Rutgers right now with a company called Unruly that does social videos and predicts viralness of content, and we're creating a course around that right now. I'm the lead for it, but I'm not working on it alone, and we're excited about the course. So what motivates people to share stuff? So there's a company called Pulsar Platform that does big data. They followed 4 of the more recent viral things, including Commander Hatfield was on a shuttle and sang a song about Major Tang. I think it's Tong, but so to say. And how that spread was mostly from him. That was this blue. And then it was organically spread out. So this was like a couple of 100,000 tweets or so on. Dove Real Beauty was more influenced by PR. And so you can see that by that diagram, I believe. This is a Turkish Dove Real Beauty. You can see the clusters show that PR was involved in pushing out a lot of this stuff. Not that it wasn't good, but that it happened partly for the efficacy of a PR seeding stuff. And then here is a Turkish protest, much smaller amount but totally organic news event that happened a month ago. So you can see, again, by the shape of the diagrams, some of the nature of the conversation is somewhat determined by its form and function. So we go back to Bauhaus School, and we go back to all the things we learned that form and function really do match each other, and that sometimes having the right form creates the function and vice versa. So these things are validated by network science, as a matter of fact. We know that there are various research about what motivates people to share. And a lot of it focuses on emotion. Strong, positive, weak positive, strong negative, weak negative. So high arousal, low arousal, high arousal, low arousal. And in this particular marketing research that comes out of Australia that's involved, there's a recent book out on the science of sharing by Karen Nelson Bunker. She works closely with Unruly, and they've come up with a market kind of analysis, market research that basically says that people are going to share stuff because they feel strongly. But what they feel might vary. So we know that there's two factors. There's what they call the psychological response and the social motivations. Unruly feels the psychological responses are more important. I'm not sure, but they're also easier to measure. What they've come up with here is a diagram that shows that Unruly does a lot of work with popular videos, and like the Yelvis the Fox that came out, the psychotelekinetic thing for Carrie, Wrecking Ball by Millis, I can never pronounce her name. Miles, yeah. And so they have an algorithm that looks at the total number of shares across not only YouTube, but also every other place that can count, and the total number of views and the total number of shares. And the idea of virality, the idea of virality is that you want the number of viewers and the number of shares to be as close to 1 as possible. So, but it never is. It's never a 1-to-1. It's always 1 to like 100 or 1 to 1,000. So, question is, can you track something is viral if you can show clearly that number of those who see it versus those that share it, or those that read it versus those that tell goes up. It's not just the number of views, it's also the amplitude. And that can be measured on a daily and a weekly basis. There's an algorithm that takes into account a number of different factors that basically, and the way they have it is 1 to 10. See, most videos would be in, say, 5. And so what Unruly would do is work with a brand and say, we can ideate this with you, we can test it out for you, we can do various things, and maybe your video will be a 7 instead of a 5, and that will be more likely to be shared. So Yelvis, believe it or not, the Norwegian firm worked with Stargate, which is a transmedia firm in New York. Not generally known, but most of the things that go viral these days are ideated with brands' help that, and it's then seeded on a PR level, not talked about, but that is the reality. There are very few things that are, except maybe news events, that are organically viral these days, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Partly because there's so much content out there. So one way you can kind of test this, there are some questionnaires that you can run that can kind of test for emotional intensity. This is one that Unruly uses. We may use in our online course. It basically says, I look at a piece of content and I rate it. So if you get 30 people to go through this, you can kind of build some sort of how does this thing score? I mean, is this video or this content or this event, does it evoke this and that feeling? And I guess you probably want about 20 or 30 people to fill out the questionnaire for a particular event. And but this is divided against video. Then the other is social motivations, like why do I share? Do I want to tell my friends about it? Do I think it's exciting? Do I think it's zeitgeist? So these are scored. I don't know the exact mechanism, but I did something different. Being that I'm a network geek and I have access to a lot of platforms, I programmed NetBase, that's a text analytics platform, to look at the psychokinetic experiment of that carry thing. And what I did is I created filters in NetBase to look at the social chatter. And NetBase has a particular type of construct called passion intensity. And I used that as a signal to pick up and see if I could detect emotion along the comments in the chatter. And I was able to pick up polarity, of course, and a couple of others. So, and I gave a webinar of NetBase 2 weeks ago on that. Now, I did this with WaterFire and the art of placemaking, and not a lot of signal, to be honest with you, but the only emotion that scored for me was astonishing. And I found that my filters were actually able to pick up a piece of content. You know, like these were things that, again, I'm not perfect in my writing of filters, so, you know, if I was doing it as a group effort, you know, better, I might have a much better success. But I came up with 3 pieces of content where there was an emotional intensity. This one was talking about, this lady had a blog post, you know, and she was really affected by the WaterFire. I don't know where this person is. Yeah, it was amazing, went offline and talked about creative placemaking. This person was at a recent one. You know, just to say that what I was trying to get to was a way to describe content that was somewhat objective. Well, you know, where we could create filters that would automatically sort of semi-categorize content. So instead of me saying, I think this is great, you know, we actually have some common consensus to describe phenomena and events. And then, you know, the placemaking conference in here, a lot of exciting things happen, but it may not be at the kind of thing that is emotionally caught by the people who have tweeted, or perhaps my filters need to be better. But we know that emotion drives people, and so it may be that taking things on the top, you know, doing something totally unexpected is what's needed. You know, something that continually happens at these events that's totally unexpected, that attracts people like Burning Man. You know, something that happens that no one expects, but then everyone wants to hear and starts talking about. And so we have the course. That's hopefully going to go live in the next month or 2, if we have time to do it. So that's it. Thank you all for, I'm around all day. And, thank you. Cheers.